Good evening and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Lucky Tuesday, or what we call July 11th, 2017 Village Council meeting. It is my privilege to call this meeting to order. There are copies of our agenda on either side of the room. If you haven't already done so and would like to, you can pick up a copy and follow along with tonight's proceedings. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment, both with respect to items that are on tonight's agenda, as well as a segment under item number 5, which is reserved for public comments of a general nature with respect to things that are not on tonight's agenda. When we get to that segment of the meeting, anyone that has a public comment or question of a general nature, I'll invite you to come up to the podium, tell us who you are, and we'll welcome hearing from you at that time. But first, it is our proud custom to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, so I'd like everyone to please rise and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And now, on 7-Eleven Day, I'd like to ask our fine village clerk, April Holden, to please call the roll.
Commissioner Wallace?
Here.
Commissioner Earl?
Here.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Here.
Commissioner White?
Here.
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 3, which pertains to minutes of past council meetings. We have one set of minutes to review and approve tonight, and those are our regular council meeting minutes from our June 20th, 2017 meeting. If there are no questions, comments, changes, or clarifications, I would love to entertain a motion to approve, please.
Mayor Tully, I move that this council approve the meeting minutes from June 20th as presented.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Those minutes are approved. And that brings us to item 4. We have a special presentation tonight, one that we get every quarter here in the Village of Downers Grove. It's a presentation by the Executive Director and President of the Economic Development Corporation and Chief Executive Officer and a few other titles, I imagine. Michael Casa is here from the Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation. As many of you know, the Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation is a separate entity from the Village of Downers Grove, and for over the last decade has worked very closely with the village staff and the community to achieve some very important things, mainly the attraction and retention of quality businesses and other economic engines to our community so that we can continue to be a vibrant community as we continue to be in DuPage County. And I've talked long enough now to allow Mr. Casa an opportunity to set up. Mr. Casa, good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Tully and Commissioners. Michael Casa, I'm President of the Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation at 5159 Mokel in downtown Downers Grove. Pleased to present our quarterly report. Before I do that, I'd like to introduce, just to acknowledge the chairman of our board, John Luca, who is Managing Director of Regions Capital Markets. John, if you could just sort of wave hello. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, Mr. Luca. Welcome.
Let me start by just updating you on some projects. First up, we should have an announcement soon on the restaurant tenants that Vequity Real Estate will have at the northwest corner of Ogden and Maine. I believe Panda Express has already submitted their plans. Packy Webb Ford is expected to open their new dealership in December, and about a month ago, or maybe less, I met with the brokers representing the company regarding their current location, and we've got a couple of dealerships that we're targeting. We're hoping to be able to backfill that space with another car dealership. Speaking of that, Lincoln is selling cars in Downers Grove, and they're beginning the work to totally retrofit and remodel the dealership at 216 Ogden. Really pleased to announce that Outback Steakhouse is coming to Downers Grove. Been working on them for about 4 years. They finally decided to open a restaurant in the Butterfield corridor. They're replacing what used to be Cheeseburger in Paradise next to Duluth Trading in the shopping center at Butterfield and Finley. And also, speaking of steak, Nasa Brazilian Grill is opening a restaurant very soon in the Butterfield Plaza Shopping Center, also on Butterfield Road. Since the last time I reported, Kirkland's opened their new store at Finley Square, and Three Corners Grill and Tap opened their new restaurant in Downers Park Plaza, and they're doing quite well. And the last one I wanted to mention is that end of last week, we landed another headquarters. United Healthcare, one of the nation's largest healthcare insurers, is going to open its new regional headquarters in Corridors 2 in Downers Grove. I was commenting to the mayor earlier, we have a lot of medical companies that now have their headquarters in Downers, as well as Midwestern University and Advocate Good Sam. I want to talk a little bit about the Grove Shopping Center, because we're spending a lot of time on that at the EDC. No doubt, it's our largest shopping center, one of our most important. It's an anchor for the southern part of the community. And let me talk about some of the challenges and some of the opportunities, because there are definitely both. First of all, some of the challenges. The center, for a long time, has been functionally and aesthetically obsolete. There are 18 owners. There was recently a news story in a regional publication, not Suburban Life, that indicated that there's like basically one owner. There's 18 owners in that center, 14 outlot owners, 4 inline, making assemblage quite challenging. And that includes the Central Grocers spot, which used to be they were the landlord for Ultra Foods. They're now in bankruptcy. The Central Grocers is in bankruptcy. And so that particular unit is one of the 4 inline. There's, of course, a sea of parking out there, because originally the center had been intended to be a large enclosed mall back, in the mid-'80s. And there are some very problematic covenant restrictions that I won't go into here, but it makes redevelopment a challenge. But there are some opportunities as well. First of all, after the Ultra Foods announcement, we've been getting interest in that center from tenants, from developers, from brokers. Just this morning, I talked to a broker calling on behalf of a potential tenant. The center has certainly seen better days. It is at a key location in a great corridor, and if you're looking at it from a developer standpoint, it's like a canvas that you can sort of do something with. And of course, we're hoping that's going to happen. So we're meeting with interested parties almost weekly. NAI Global, which is one of the world's premier real estate firms, is representing the largest of the inline owners, C3 out of Dallas, for purposes of a sale. And we're trying to coordinate so that all of the owners of the inline space are all working together, hopefully to find one buyer. And I guess on the plus side, the outlots in that center actually are fairly stable. There's no vacancies. There's a small medical building, I think, coming in to one of the spots. And of course, Ashiana is one of the anchors for the center, our largest private banquet facility. So it's the inline that really presents the challenge, as well as all that parking. Let me talk about some sales tax information. This is a first quarter report. The home rule sales tax in the first quarter of 17 over 16 was down just over 1% year over year, and the municipal sales tax was down 3.5% from 16. We had a really good first quarter in 16. Obviously, the numbers are not very good for the first quarter of 17. So we took a look at how we did against our competitors. These are the municipalities that are in our trade area, and that's the trade area defined by AECOM that did a report for us a year ago, in which they identified one of the things that were in the report was which municipalities are in our trade area. This is who we compete with for projects. So what we do is we set up a chart. We showed the 2016 over 2015. So you see, for example, the first quarter of 16, Downers Grove was ahead for almost 4.5%. So you can see that most of the communities a year ago had a good first quarter where they were ahead from the previous quarter. You'll see how it is now in terms of the first quarter. Downers Grove, Bolingbrook, Darien, Lisle, and Lombard, and Oak Brook were all trending down in the first quarter of 17 year over year as compared to the previous quarter. Westmont and Woodridge were up. And one thing I wanted to mention about Westmont, Lisa Wenzel in our office refers to it as the Art Van effect. That's when a new store opens, they do tremendously in their first year, It is difficult for them to match that in year 2. So when I show you the April numbers, which just came out, you'll see that Westmont is down. Mariano's had opened late in the first quarter of 16, and that's going to be reflective in the months ahead. And then DuPage County, we also noted as well, because they are a sales tax collector, and they were flat in how they did a year ago in terms of were they up or down versus this past quarter. Again, I mentioned April. April's numbers, we just got those yesterday. So there's the raw totals for the municipal sales tax and the home rule sales tax. So the municipal sales tax was just about break even from April of 2016, and the home rule sales tax was up 4.64%. Still not great numbers, but I'm hoping that we're starting to turn that corner in terms of comparing whether it's months or quarters versus a year ago. And let me also show the comparisons of our trade area competitors. Again, this is April of 16 versus April of 17. You will see again, Downers Grove was just about break even. Darien, Lombard were up. Bolingbrook, Lyle, Oak Brook, and Westmont were down, and that was the Westmont information I mentioned earlier. Woodridge is up. And DuPage County was up a little over a percent. Okay, first quarter sales taxes by category. The state of Illinois publishes on a quarterly basis sales tax revenues by segment. So they have released the first quarter numbers. Those are the raw numbers, but it's the percentages I want to go over. I hope you can read that. So general merchandise this is first quarter of 17 over first quarter of 16. So general merchandise was down 4.8%. Grocery down 11.13%. Some of that will be due to Ultra closing in the early part of the year. Restaurants, which they refer to as drinking and eating places, were up 5.35%. Apparel was up 8.1%. And the reason for that is we do not have a lot of apparel stores in Downers Grove. We have had some that have opened in the Butterfield corridor in the past year. Furniture and appliance, which includes Art Van, was down 4.83%. And I referenced that earlier. Art Van in its first year, and I realize that's not the only business in this segment, but they're a major one. In their first year, they broke a lot of records, store records. It is difficult to break records every year. And so when I talked to them, that would explain at least their portion of that number. But if you compare that with 2015, just as an example, it's a 32% increase in that segment. Hardware was up just slightly. Automotive was down. That's both a combination of auto dealerships and gas stations, down 2.4%. Drugs and miscellaneous, which is a category that fluctuates wildly by month and also by year, was down 27%. And we in our office, we're trying to figure this out, and we think the reason is there are hundreds of categories under miscellaneous. The drugs is actually only one portion of it. It's sort of they throw all the miscellaneous categories do not appear in these segments into one category. And then I wanted to mention, if I could, about the general merchandise and apparel. Downers Grove is not invested in those two segments. We haven't been for a long time. Apparel stores and department stores. There may be a silver lining there, and that is that those are the two segments, retail segments, that are seeing the most store closings. So we're not as vulnerable as other communities that have a lot of apparel stores and department stores as an overall percentage of their retail mix. I also want to talk about autos. I presented the first chart, the first column, I should say, when I did the report the last time, and I wanted to update it for you. So U.S. auto sales by selected brand These are all the new car brands in Downers Grove. And if you see up on the chart how those brands did in the United States, domestic auto sales, 2016 over 2015, you can see it's a mix. The Chrysler, for example, was down nationally 27%. There were some that were up, and others that were also down. So we looked at the same numbers for May of 2017, year to date, over the same period a year ago. And you can see, for example, some of the ones that are down nationally, Chrysler, Ford, Dodge, Hyundai, Jeep, and then the others are up in the United States. Those would include Mazda, Mitsubishi, Nissan, Volkswagen, and Buick. The one that's not on here, and now we're going to be represented by them, is Lincoln, which was up 5.8% in May of 17 for year to date over the same period a year ago. The other thing I wanted to mention is, some of you may know I'm from the Detroit area originally. I have a lot of friends that are in the automotive industry, and one of the things that I've been hearing a lot of is that with 2015 having been the peak year for automotive sales in the United States, and the average American family will make a car purchase every 3 to 4 years. So if that cycle continues, it could bode well for domestic car sales in the United States in 18 and 19. After the Great Recession hit, a lot of people just put off buying a new car. It plateaued in 15, and so again, if that cycle should continue, we could see a bump in auto sales in next year and the year after. I want to talk about some retail trends. In May of this year, I attended the International Council of Shopping Centers show. It's the largest retail development show in the world. Over 40,000 retailers, restaurateurs, brokers, and developers attend that show. And there were a lot of takeaways from it. And I wanted to mention some of those to you. So there's some not so good news, but there's also some good news. First of all, retail e-commerce is expected to continue to grow. Larger retailers are transitioning their stores into showrooms that provide the customer with an experience. Retailers are also driving customers to their website or their app. Thus, they are carrying lower inventories in the store. Many retailers are now incenting customers, even those in the store, to go to a kiosk and to sign up for the app. And then all the purchases they make, even if they're in the store, are online purchases. Second is the big elephant in the room, Amazon. Their acquisition of Whole Foods has probably been the biggest story that's hit the retail sector in years. And store closings, which are prevalent all throughout the United States. There's almost a daily announcement of some national retail store closing. In our trade area, we're not immune. JCPenney and Sam's have announced, actually Sam's is now closed, in Woodridge. Sears is closing their Oak Brook Mall store. And Carson's and Neiman Marcus are hanging on. As a matter of fact, yesterday's cranes, one of the stories was, how much longer can Carson's hang on? Tough times for department stores and apparel stores. The EDC tracks industry trends and retail information on a daily basis. I subscribe to all the major retail industry newsletters, and we get this information, again, on a daily basis. While I do not believe that e-commerce will supplant bricks and mortar stores as the principal point of purchase for the American consumer, there is a dramatic shift taking place in the sector. And let me just show you some of the recent headlines. This one, the number of bankruptcies in the retail sector is now larger than it was during the Great Recession. The words are being thrown around like tsunami and apocalypse. The Amazon Whole Foods deal, again, has gotten a lot of ink. This headline says, from the Harvard Business Review, the Amazon Whole Foods deal means every other retailer's 3-year plan is now obsolete. And the last one just talks about the store closures. A 218% increase in national retail stores closing over a year ago. That's the not so good news. Here's some better news. Despite these headlines, there are a lot of opportunities to attract retailers and restaurants to Downers Grove, to help our shopping center owners upgrade their centers and their tenant mix, and to pursue opportunities for redevelopment. This is our highest priority. Our staff works on it every day. At our next EDC Executive Committee meeting later this month, I will review tenant recruitment and redevelopment opportunities, including the Grove Shopping Center, which is probably right now, I would say, our best opportunity for a major redevelopment. Here are a few items on our to-do list. Utilize the 2017 Village Comprehensive Plan, implement strategies in our strategic plan, implement strategies in the 2016 Sales Tax Revenue Economic Development Plan, utilize the 2016 AECOM Retail Study, track retail sales and sales tax revenue data, track trends in the retail and auto dealer sectors, implement marketing programs to promote Downers Grove as a premier location for commercial investment, maintain contact with local shopping center owners regarding prospective tenants and redevelopment opportunities, maintain contact with retail developers, brokers, and corporate real estate managers who work for the retailer. Identify retailers and restaurants that are prospective tenants in this trade area, and continue to participate in the International Council of Shopping Center events. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity and your time, and I'd be happy to welcome any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Casa. Appreciate the thorough summary of things that have been going on since the last report, as well as identifying some very important trends and macroeconomic things that are going on that I think we need to be cognizant of, and in fact have been talking about for some time as they affect municipalities both here at home as well as across the entire country. I'll ask my colleagues if they have any questions or comments this time. No comments?
No comments.
Very good. Well, thank you for the presentation, and it's far from it.
Yes.
You make it look easy.
Well, you do. You guys, the support you give our organization, as well as the staff, is just tremendous, and we're very grateful.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. We'll move on now to section or item 5 on our agenda tonight, which is reserved for public comments of a general nature. This is the segment where if any members of the audience have any questions or comments of a general nature with respect to things not on tonight's agenda, I would invite them to please come up to the podium, introduce yourself, and we'll welcome hearing from you. Good evening, sir. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. My name's Dennis Johnson, and I've lived in Downers Grove for 40 years, and I live at the south end of town. What I wanted to just address in a 2 or 3 minute presentation here is to talk about the intersection of Grove and Carpenter. Okay? In May of 2016, I had some concerns about this intersection, and I mentioned my concerns to one of the commissioners, and my concerns worked its way through the village process and to get some attention to that particular intersection. But let me start out by telling you what my concerns were with that intersection. There are 2 concerns. One as it relates to safety, and the other one that as it relates to the integrity of construction in that area. Safety was related to the reduction of the size of the intersection by about 1 car width. And my understanding of the purpose of that was to reduce the speed of traffic going down that area. The village put up some signage there indicating the reduction of the road, but the signs were about 5 inches wide and about 30 inches high, and they were ivory color, and they were stuck in the ground, which were easily removed by the residents when they cut the grass. They put the signs back in. I requested of the village to put more permanent signs there, preferably red, indicating that the width of the intersection was reduced. In the wintertime, the ivory structures, which are not easily identified in the snow. Myself and others have misjudged the width of that intersection, and you can see our tire scuffs against the curb. From the construction integrity of that intersection, there were ruts in the street from the cars going down. You could actually see in that brick street the ruts of the traffic going down. The sewer in the middle of the street was probably 6 to 8 inches above the natural swale of the street, and the cement aprons that bridged the difference between the bricks and the asphalt, there was a droppage of the bricks of about 2 to 3 inches, which created a natural speed bump on those aprons. And at that time, the spacing between the bricks had opened up their spacings. They weren't nice and tight. And the village did put up a sign, I requested, bump. So there was a sign until it was fixed that there was a bump. Several months later, the gaps for the bricks were fixed. The bump at the 2 different areas were resolved. The high sewer still remained in the middle, and there were no they're now reflective plastic reflectors on the curb, which aren't visible when the snow comes. So this year, around mid-April, I worked my way through the village management and again expressed my concern that the repairs didn't even last a year. I took pictures in 2016 and then currently, and I provided those pictures to the people involved. Today, the issues are the safety issues. The reduction of the intersection has not been adequately resolved from my perspective. The cement aprons, the gaps still are there, and you still have that feeling of a speed bump. And the bricks now are starting to sink beyond that apron, and the sewer is still in the middle of the street. And the village, this time while they're working their way through a proposal, has put up a sign that says rough road, so people who never traveled down there will see that. It's my understanding that the Public Relations or Public Works Department is evaluating some options and is going to put together a report and give it to you folks. But I wanted to give you a village person's responsibility. One day I was trying to figure out, how many times do I really travel, my wife and I, travel from one side of the town to the other? Well, it was 5 times, so that's 10 times we went through that intersection. So here are my concerns, general concerns. How many cars travel down that street? Does the structure adequately support the volume of traffic? It used to be an asphalt street before. If the sewer's too high in the middle of the street, raise the street, cut the sewer down. The sinking still goes on in the intersection that was there 2 years ago. So I'm wondering if something is wrong with the design of the intersection, that there's not an adequate displacement of water, and maybe that's why it's sinking. I think the vendor that worked on that really has got to have their feet to the fire for the conditions that road is in for less than 12 months. Maybe there's a better alternative than having a brick part of that street, considering the volume. I would ask each member of the council to drive their car through that intersection and then park their car in that church parking lot and listen to the bumps, and you can see the front ends of the cars as they go through that intersection. On Saturday, I drove through that intersection and I took some pictures, and I wanted to recall exactly what was there to define the reduction of the size of the intersection. There is one pole or one stick about 8 inches high with a reflector on it on the widest part of the intersection. There's scuff marks on the curve, but that reflector, as I drove from the south side to the north side, if you take a look at that reflector, in the background is a church, part of a church, which has the same color as that reflector, so it's not definable that the intersection is being reduced. I consider that Carpenter Street as important to me as Dunham Road is. So I ask you, when you get your proposal and that you take a look at it, and let's try to get that thing resolved and not have to have me come up here next year and say, why are we doing this again? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I appreciate you sharing those insights. And frankly, I'm going to have to pay closer attention because I probably go down that street a dozen times every week.
But you're probably used to those bumps.
Maybe. Maybe. I go down there all the time. I'll I have to confess I didn't notice some of those things. I'll keep an eye out for them. And I know that reconstruction, when it was done, the last major reconstruction that was done there was done with permeable pavers as part of an attempt to not only do something that was aesthetically different, but also something that would be better for stormwater management, and using permeable pavers as opposed to asphalt, which of course just sends the water off. So I think we're still learning from the experience, but it was an attempt to do something different than what had been done before. And so in one respect, that's good. You always want to try something different to see what benefits you can capture from it, but you also learn some things from it. So certainly we're still in that process. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. And as we go forward with further improvements, and Manager Fieldman's going to add to it right now.
A quick summary, the project was an innovation and experimental project. The balance of that project has worked extremely well and is being replicated in other places around the Midwest, but this intersection has failed. It failed once. It was rebuilt, redesigned at the complete expense of the contractor and the subcontractors.
In July of last year, no
Correct.
expense to the village.
At no expense to the village. There's still some issues with it. There's some separation between the two types of materials, and it's sinking, and so it's going to be redesigned and rebuilt again. We'll have a report to the council on that probably in August or September. So we are completely aware and working diligently to address this at no cost to the taxpayer. So we'll have more information on that shortly.
Right. And I know some of the materials that are being used there really are innovative, including a triaxial geogrid.
Correct.
But some of it is a question of whether it actually withstands the field test in terms of the volume of traffic that go down Carpenter and also Grove. So thank you for that additional information.
But if I might ask make one comment, and that is, for those of us who drive down that street, it's roads. We know where to go. We know to get in the middle of the street. But have friends and people come over, they're not going to know that quickly identify that intersection has been reduced in width. And the second concern, the first concern was the safety. So I think it needs to be better identified that there is a reduction there. Sure,
fair point. And what I heard is the signage has changed over time, and typically we like to address signage issues in incremental stages, trying to go with the simplest solution first, but it may very well warrant more along the lines of what you discussed. So again, thank you for keeping an eye on it, and I certainly will when I go through there tomorrow. Thank you. Other questions or comments of a general nature from members of the audience? All right, very good. Well, thank you. That brings us to item 6, which is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, please?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any of the items on tonight's consent agenda? Any questions or comments from members of the village council? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl? Aye. Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Consent agenda passes unanimously. That brings us to item 7, which is our active agenda. We have a number of items on tonight's active agenda. First, item 7A is an apple. Do I have a motion to authorize the preliminary design of public sidewalks in the northwest Belmont area?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council authorize the preliminary design and initial layout of public sidewalks in the northwest Belmont area as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments from members of the audience? Questions or comments from the council?
Very good idea.
Indeed. I'm sorry?
It's a very good idea. We should move forward.
Any other questions or comments? There are none. Let's move forward. Roll call, please.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl? Aye. Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Burnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That matter passes unanimously and brings us to item 7B as in boy. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance amending certain parking and traffic provisions?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council adopt an ordinance amending certain parking and traffic provisions as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments from members of the audience? Questions or comments from members of the council? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, that matter passes unanimously and brings us to item 7C as in Charlie. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance adopting the 2015 International Residential Code and amendments thereto?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council adopt an ordinance adopting the 2015 International Residential Code and amendments thereto as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments from members of the audience? Questions or comments from members of the council? Commissioner Jose.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank the staff for including these couple of local amendments requiring a heat detector in attached garages and requiring a drywall in areas of a garage that come in contact with a living space or attic. While it's not as effective as a residential sprinkler, now I recognize that my argument didn't carry the day on that one, but I think these are good additional steps that will help keep residents safe at a minimal cost. So I look forward to supporting this. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from members of the council? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, that matter passes unanimously and brings us to item 7D as in David. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance adopting the 2015 International Building Code and amendments thereto?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council adopt an ordinance adopting the 2015 International Building Code and amendments thereto as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments from members of the audience? Questions or comments from members of the village council? May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, the matter passes unanimously and brings us to item 7E as in Edward. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance adopting the 2015 International Property Maintenance Code and amendments thereto?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council adopt an ordinance adopting the 2015 International Property Maintenance Code and amendments thereto as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments from members of the audience? Questions or comments from members of the village council? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, that also passes unanimously and brings us to item 7F. Is that just a coincidence that the fire prevention code is item 7F? Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance adopting the 2015 International Fire Prevention Code and amendments thereto?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council adopt an ordinance adopting the 2015 International Fire Code and amendments thereto as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments on this item from any members of the audience? Questions or comments from members of the village council? I will just state that I do think this strikes an appropriate balance with respect to the discussion that previously took place between this and other alternatives. So thank you for identifying and putting those for us as options. Have a roll call, please.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, that matter also passes unanimously. Now, let's move on to item 7G as in Gus. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance adopting the 2015 International Fuel Gas Code and amendments thereto?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council adopt an ordinance adopting the 2015 International Fuel Gas Code and amendments thereto as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments on this item, if any members of the audience? Questions or comments from the village council? I'm going to get a workout today. Roll call, please.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That matter passes unanimously. Brings us to item 7H as in Henry. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance adopting the 2015 International Mechanical Code and amendments thereto?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council adopt the 2015 International Mechanical Code and amendments thereto as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments on the mechanical code? Okay, audience, council, hearing none. Roll call, please.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. And that brings us to item 7I. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance adopting the 2015 International Swimming Pool and Spa Code and amendments thereto?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council adopt an ordinance adopting the 2015 International Swimming Pool and Spa Code and amendments thereto as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments on the International Swimming Pool and Spa Code from the audience or from the village council? Commissioner Barnett. I'm just glad to know there is an international swimming pool in Spa Code.
As this is the last of these motions, I just thought I'd mention for those either here or at home that are wondering what in the world are we doing without any discussion adopting a bunch of 2.5-year-old codes. The process, it goes like this. The village's building codes that are adopted in 2009 are 2006 edition codes. This is pretty typical. These codes get reviewed periodically by an international group of experts in the field. There's a public audit process for that. They then are adopted. Municipalities tend to adopt them after a little bit of evolutionary experience of those codes in the field. Things like your insurance, fire insurance, various safety ratings are also affected by these codes. This is a very normal thing. So for those that don't understand the process, we're not just 2 years behind the ball and first waking up versus 2009. It's just kind of the way these codes go. If you are interested in specific changes, they are all available on our website with today's meeting notes. So.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from members of the council? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl? Aye. Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That one passes unanimously, and we're not done yet. We'll move to item 7J, as in Jeffrey. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance amending the alarm code?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council adopt an ordinance amending the alarm code as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments on the alarm code? Questions or comments from members of the village council? May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl? Aye. Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That passes unanimously and brings us to the last item on our active agenda tonight, which is item 7K as in kangaroo. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance amending provisions for permit applications?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council adopt an ordinance amending provisions for permit applications as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments on this item from members of the audience? Questions or comments from members of the village council? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl? Aye. Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That matter passes unanimously and brings us to the end of our active agenda and on to item 8, our first reading or our workshop agenda. This is the portion of our meeting where we take things a little less formally. Items are introduced by staff for discussion and consideration purposes only. No formal action or final action will be taken at this point in time. We switch things up a little bit and usually ask staff to introduce the item for discussion, then the council will ask questions or seek additional information, and then we'll turn it over to the audience for any further input or comments thereon. So with that, I'd like to introduce our village manager, David Fieldman, who can then introduce Stan Popovich, who will then introduce the item.
Which is an ordinance rezoning the property at 49 Cross Street. Stan.
Thank you, Manager Fielding. Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
This is an item rezoning a property at 4910 Cross Street. It's on the west side of town, just a little bit north of the railroad tracks there, in an area that the village annexed a few years ago. When we annex properties, it comes in as R1, which is the most restrictive zoning classification, with the most restrictive setbacks as well. The property you can see here on the maps on the west side of Cross Street, just a little bit south of Hadow. What we find here is a 50-foot wide lot. The R1 zoning classification has a 40-foot setback and then larger side yard setbacks, so it would decrease the width of the home. What the petition is requesting is a rezoning to R4, which is consistent with a 50-foot wide lot that we see in other parts of town. With regard to the comprehensive plan that was recently adopted, the plan notes that we should encourage and provide a variety of housing types, modernize housing types and housing stock. So the applicant would actually be consolidating these two 25-foot wide lots into one 50-foot wide lot to provide a new single-family home in this residential zoning district, which is in the future land use plan is designated as residential as well. With regard to the criteria for zoning map amendment, staff's found that these criteria are met as well. If there's any questions, I can answer those for you at this time.
Thank you for the presentation. Questions, comments from members of the council? Questions or comments from members of the audience? Very good. Next item, please.
The next item is consideration of an ordinance establishing a food and beverage tax. And tonight, this item will be presented by Megan Miles in the manager's office. She is the person who is leading this project, and you know her work well from long-range plan and other budget support items. So I'll turn it over to Megan.
Good evening, Ms. Miles. We're big fans of your work.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here to present the proposed 1% food and beverage tax. This tax was discussed in long-range planning meetings earlier this summer, and direction was provided to staff to pursue this tax for 2018. The village has been experiencing declining revenues, just like many other communities in the region. These declines are due in part to the changing purchasing habits of consumers, shifting away from traditional brick-and-mortar retail towards experiences and online shopping. The declining revenues in both sales and income tax for the village are estimated to be $1.3 million for fiscal year 2017. To address this decline, the village has implemented cost-cutting measures to attain a balanced general fund budget for fiscal year 2017. Looking to 2018 and beyond, the village is proposing this tax to replenish the lost revenues from the declining sales and income tax and achieve a balanced general fund budget. The 1% tax would apply to the purchase price of alcohol, packaged liquor, prepared foods, and non-alcoholic beverages for immediate consumption. Staff estimates this tax would bring in about $1.5 million in revenue and is a revenue that would experience growth over time. This projection comes from an analysis staff performed on state-reported revenues for drinking and eating places in the village over a 7-year period, 2010 to 2016. This analysis showed steady growth of about 4.3% yearly. If adopted, the tax would go into effect January 1, 2018, with the first collections coming in February. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Questions from the council? Commissioner Barnett?
Thanks, Mayor. I appreciate the information we got this afternoon. There's quite a bit of sort of market data that I'd asked for that we got this afternoon that I encourage all my colleagues to look through. I think we need to think carefully about how we go at this and think about whether we're missing some opportunities. I think we long-term need to be focused on the idea that our revenue streams are going to be different than they have in the past, which is what makes this an excellent idea to be considering. But if we look at market areas sort of stuff, we have everywhere from 2% in the neighborhood to 1.5% to 0% to no tax at all. And I'd encourage us to be thinking about, if we decide we do want to go forward with this, I think we should be thinking about 1.5%. Our nearest neighbor, Westmont, is at that. Downtown Naperville and Lombard both have 2%. And I guess I think that it's unlikely, and I can't prove this, I'd certainly welcome EDC input, but I think it's unlikely that folks say to themselves when they're choosing a place to go out to eat, who's got the lower tax? I just don't see that happening. I don't think anybody right now goes to the cellar door because DOC has a 2% tax. And so as we struggle as a community with revenue streams that are increasingly unreliable, I think we should just think about whether or not we're leaving something behind. Now I'm going to totally flip and contradict myself because I know my colleagues love it when I do that. But I also struggle a little bit with this because I think we've gotten here perhaps a little too easily. For some time now, we've danced around in our conversations in long-term planning, budgeting last year, some of our facilities-related conversations. We've kind of danced around, I think, the subject of seriously delving into service levels. And I think we're not doing our job as well as we should if we look first to revenue sources and then hope to sometime when we have enough time, which doesn't seem to ever come, have serious conversations about service levels. The fact of the matter is this could be a $1.5 million, $2 million shot in the arm, to be sure, and I think it's probably one we should do. But whether it grows at 4% or 2.8%, that kind of growth on $1.5 million is not enough to keep pace with our basic cost structure. And so I think it's probably the right move, and I think that we should do it sooner rather than later. I'm kind of talking myself into that, but I think we should also consider whether we could do more and whether or not we're going to get serious about some of those other conversations that need to happen if we're doing what I think we are obliged to do on behalf of the residents. We keep ducking those conversations, and that's where the real money is. This is $1.5 million now. It fills a hole. It probably hangs around at $1.5 million to $2 million for the near foreseeable future. It's not the solution to our long-term problem. I'll remind everybody when we saw some of the conversations in the committee room that led up to this, we had like 11% cost growth on a 27% not payroll, but headcount reduction. Those are two curves that go the wrong direction with respect to each other. And that headcount reduction is not something that's going to or can continue. So I think we're faking ourselves out a little bit in the 3 to 5 year window if we think this takes us very far. So there's a lot there, and there's a lot to think about here. It's, I think, probably the right move, but let's not do it halfway, and let's make sure that if we do it, we're committed to doing these other things on the cost end that we need to do.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just to clarify something, because when you're talking about expenses or costs, there's really two different categories. In terms of operational expenses, clearly, and I don't think I'll get any argument from anybody up here or even people who were here years ago, that over the last decade, easily, there's been tremendous focus on running a lean organization and a lot of reductions in cost. 75, 76%, maybe 77% of our operational costs are personnel. And the fiscal 17 budget, as adopted by this council, calls for a net reduction of over 16 full-time positions in a number of different places, and that is really a trend that has been going on for years. So in terms of reducing expenses, I think it needs to be clarified that the village has been committed to that, staff's been committed to that. It's really part of its DNA at this point in time. I don't think that's what you're saying. I don't think what you're saying is that you can't just keep getting rid of people when almost 80% of your budget are people because of the services they deliver. Eventually, if you're going to go beyond that, you need to look at wholesale, what is it that you're delivering in the first place?
Right.
And that's really what you're talking about.
It's a good clarification, Mayor. I tried to touch that when I said service level instead of cost and expense. You clarified it exactly right.
Right.
Thank you.
I only say that because we have for some time, and I'm not saying this to you, this is more for clarification, put reducing expenses first before even entertaining this topic of what I would call replacement tax, because it's designed to replace something that has gone away. It's not adding to new revenue, it's replacing lost revenue. As we see the kind of macroeconomic changes that we're talking about here, it's a matter of capturing things that otherwise we're losing, and frankly we're losing it to other communities, is really the problem here. And just to also clarify, so everyone understands the full context, for the adopted fiscal 17 budget, the property tax levy is $12.8 million, which, just so everyone understands, is less than what the property tax levy was for the fiscal 2012 budget. So here we are 5 years later, and our property tax levy is less for operations. I'll be clear about that, less for operations than what it was 5 years ago. The only thing that comes close to that amount of revenue that runs this village, which includes police, fire, public works, everything else that we do, our sales tax revenue. That's close behind the property tax levy at $12.8 million. Sales tax revenue is $12.3 million, and that's what we're talking about is changing significantly due to macroeconomic trends. And while I hope that there's a bump in the cycle due to car sales in 19, I think we all can see with the evolution and advance of ride sharing and autonomous vehicles that that's not going to be sustainable. So the sales tax revenue from things like that is obviously going to change. So we do have to be cognizant of changes in the broader environment, not just here in Downers Grove. And then just for those who are keeping track, what are the other, so our top two revenue streams are the property tax levy at $12.8 million, sales tax at $12.3 million for the adopted fiscal 17 budget. Then we have our home rule sales tax, which is about $2 million. So you can see after that it drops way off. And actually I should have started with our share of the state income tax or the local government distributed fund is $5 million a year, so it drops way off. And then the utility tax is 5.1, and then you get the home rule sales tax at 2.0. And all of these are being affected. We've heard every single year conversations at the state level about challenges to the municipal share of the income tax. And now with the budget that was just adopted earlier this month by the General Assembly, there's this 2% holdback on our sales tax, a processing fee of 2%, which for us I think translates into somewhere between $600,000 and $800,000 a year.
I think so. We'll have
something like that. At any rate, it's just to give you an idea. It's probably mid six figures of money that we no longer will have because of a processing fee the state is charging us. So we do have to we do have to look at other things and changes in the environment and also challenges in other places. Commissioner Barnett raises a point about service levels because you can't keep reducing FTEs till eventually you have no one doing everything. I know we ask staff to keep doing more and more with less and less, but eventually you can't do everything with nothing. So that's why we're even entertaining this replacement tax of food and beverage. It's designed to capture what is growing. It's this experiential thing that we see developing in more and more communities. Other communities are grabbing this revenue to replace their own lost sales tax, and so we should make sure that we hold our own for our own community. And in that respect, it is, no one likes a tax of any sort, of course, but the different thing about this one is it is something that gets paid by non-residents who visit our town. So we work very hard through Mr. Casa and other people in our community to bring restaurants and to bring businesses to town that others will come from outside of Downers Grove and help pay that revenue that then helps us support our revenues that we don't have to capture through a property tax levy on our own residents. And if I'm correct, this is one that, if it is passed, will be collected and paid to us directly.
Yes.
Without going through the Bank of Springfield?
Correct. No 2% holdback on this one. We keep all.
And that's important because, as I just mentioned, in the last budget that was passed, revenues that do go through Springfield are at the mercy of Springfield deciding to siphon off whatever they want to, which they just did to us. So that's another reason why this has some advantages as opposed to other things. So clearly, to your point, we never want to talk about these things, and we haven't for many, many years, and instead have focused on a culture of lean and mean, as already described in the context I just provided. There may be other conversations yet to be had, but in terms of replacing lost revenue, this clearly seems to be superior than other options. And on that note, I just want to make clear that without going into detail on it, as part of our long-range planning and earlier discussions, before we even got to this point, the council did ask staff to float other potential options for replacing this lost revenue, and I believe my colleagues will agree with me that none of them were more attractive, or I should say this was the least unattractive.
Right.
That's probably a better way to put it, the least unattractive. So just wanted to provide that context as a follow-up to your comments.
There's another real value. I mean, everybody hates taxes, but this one is, as you said, Mayor, it's part of it to some degree is paid by others, which is great. Another part,
people who are going to be paying it anyway, they just might as well pay it to us as opposed to our neighbors. That's the point.
And the other thing is, as opposed to a pure property tax hit, it's a discretionary thing. It's paid by those that choose to engage in these activities, which are not necessarily something they have to do as a function of their being in their homes as far
Right.
as the senior citizens, that kind of a thing. So there's a lot of real value and upside to this. I'm trying to use this opportunity to underscore that we've ducked this conversation a little bit. Our staff has done a great job of embracing lean as an organization. They are absolutely doing it. We could spend all 2 or 3 meetings pointing back to the evidence of that. But when you talk about those other revenue sources and you start to highlight it, I mean, it's important that our residents think this through. 25% of what it costs to deliver all the services we deliver is coming from property tax and is the only thing that's predictable and reliable and sustainable, the only piece of our revenue stream. Whether it's LGDF, whether it's 2% holdbacks by the state, whether it's sales tax, just consumer trend declines, whether it's utility taxes that we rely on, where everybody's trying to cut the cord. The fact of the matter is 25% of operating this village is paid for by our residents through property taxes, and I don't think a lot of folks understand that. And it's a big deal because it means that 75% of our costs are to some degree out of our control, and this is using it as a replacement tax is the exact right choice of words. I'm glad to hear you're saying that, because I worry that looking at the last 3 or 4 years of our crew and our team's council, not staff, efforts at budgeting, we've kind of ducked this service issue thing because we cannot just continue to cut heads. Staff is doing the best they can. They're doing a darn good job of it. At some point, we're going to need to spend some money that's not going to come from hoping that maybe it comes out of Springfield or hoping that maybe we get another car dealership.
And just on that point, and that's always a potential topic of conversation, I do think that in various ways, shapes, or form, this and prior councils have pursued opportunities to deliver services in a different way, whether it be partnerships or outsourcing or other innovative approaches, that they may not wholesale change what the service is, which I think is what you're really talking about, but there have been efforts to at least be innovative and creative in how to deliver services, the existing services, in more efficient and cost-effective ways, beyond just reducing FTEs.
Sure.
But topic for another conversation, perhaps.
Indeed.
I'll stop there and ask if others have questions or comments, because this is clearly not the first time that we've discussed this as a council, but the first time that we're workshopping it.
So I can go very briefly here. All of the prior comments are things I think we have to address. However, given the decline in income tax, sales tax, village staff needs to prepare an FY18 budget, and they need to start. I support the 1% food and beverage tax immediately. I don't want to tie that discussion into any larger discussions. We need to have those discussions, and hopefully we can do that in August. But I look forward to passing the food and beverage tax next week, have the 1% off the table so that the village staff has certainty when they look at planning their FY18 revenue stream. And then hopefully we can hold our own feet to the fire and have those larger discussions when we come back in August.
Thank you. Commissioner, other questions or comments?
I just wanted, I think got lost in there a little bit. Mayor and I went down a little bit of a rabbit trail. I would like my colleagues to, between now and next week, seriously think about the 1.5 points. I think there's a lot of logic to suggesting that it's not something that's going to impact our local businesses, and yet, I mean, it could be a big difference to us here. It's almost 2/3 of the holdback, for example. So. Right.
Understood. And that's why this is a workshop. One thing I forgot to mention is clearly, just to pick up on something Commissioner Barnett said that I meant to say earlier, is that one of the reasons why this was a less unattractive option is because the property tax is one that you have no choice but to pay simply by living in your home or owning your home. You end up paying it, whereas a food and beverage tax is one that can be avoided, and it's one that is being paid by somebody. We'd just rather they pay it to our community rather than to our neighbor's community. The other thing that needs to be said about property taxes is that I believe it may be up to 9% now, but the average household property tax bill in the village of Downers Grove, the village, everything that we're talking about, that $12.8 million only represents about 9% of the property tax bill. So most of the times when we hear from people about their agitation about property taxes, we're less than 10% of it. The rest of it comes from other entities that are outside of our control. But yet we do our best to try to maintain it as responsibly low as possible, which I think we've done pretty successfully for the last 5-6 years and more. Other questions or comments from the council before I go to the audience, and then we can always come back. Questions or comments on this item from members of the audience? Well, obviously, we're not voting on this tonight, so there'll be other opportunities for input from anyone interested. Final thoughts, conclusions, comments from members of the council with respect to the workshop discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to the next item. Thank you.
The next item, item C, is a resolution authorizing an agreement with Allied Waste Services of North America. Here to present background information on this item is our Deputy Village Manager, Mike Baker.
Good evening, Mr. Baker.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Thank you, Dave. This item includes a contract with Allied Waste, otherwise known as Republic Services, for residential solid waste collection and disposal services. On June 6th, Council directed staff to negotiate terms of a contract with Republic that would take effect after the current contract expires in March of 2018. The full contract is included in the staff report, and the key terms of that contract include a 5-year contract, no change in pricing in year 1, 2% annual increases in years 2 through 5. That includes 1 Amnesty Day event, a continuation of the downtown recycling program at no direct cost to the village of Downers Grove. And the village has also been working with Republic Services through the Environmental Concerns Commission to develop a composting program. That's something that's still in the fairly early stages of development. It'll come back to council sometime shortly once it's further refined. But it is another area where we're looking at a program enhancement for residents that want to take advantage of it. Representatives from Republic Services are here, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Questions or comments from the council? Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Seems like just a few years ago that our waste management process was a high priority item and a discussion that lasted, I don't know, several months rather than what we're going through right now. And it looks like with a little tweaking that this will go through fairly quickly. So it isn't the long-range planning process that it was. I'm glad to see that. I've had no complaints about our system that we currently have. I think our provider is doing a great job, and with a little tweaking and answering a few questions, let's say about the amnesty day and that, I intend that there's not going to be a major shakeup in this process. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions? Commissioner Jose.
Thank you, Mayor. More of a comment. I'd just like to point out to folks that there was no increase in the cost last year, and under this proposal, there's no increase in the cost next year. I think that's, it was a third year. It was 3. I apologize. And the increases after that are relatively modest at 2%. I like that we received a lot of feedback on the idea of implementing a composting program, and I see that that's in the works. I think there's a lot of good things in this contract now. Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from council? Commissioner Earl.
I also have received nothing but fantastic service from Republic, and no complaints from neighbors, nothing. And there's an old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I'm comfortable with the way we're going with this. So thank you, Republic, for the good service you've provided so far, and hope that it continues like that in the future.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Barnett?
I might as well just throw water on the fire. Republic's
We're trying to light the water on fire.
We're trying to light the water on fire. Cuyahoga River. Republic's done a good job, so my comments are in no way a reflection of Republic nor of staff, who's done exactly what we've asked of them a couple of cycles in a row now here in terms of negotiating with Republic, and the results have been great. I mean, it's been a good job. I guess I had this conversation the last time we renewed this contract, and it didn't get any traction then. I suspect from touching base with some of my colleagues it won't again. But I want to highlight some things that I wish were a little bit different about what we do. I think we're subsidizing to some degree some folks with this contract because of the way it's structured. When you say I put my garbage out once every 3 weeks, that's great, but the availability of that truck, the fact that truck's on your street, is there because we have a program in place. And it's a program paid for by those folks who are using the service weekly and buying the toters and putting the toters out there and paying their monthly charges. I don't think that's appropriate. I also think that if we said to people, like Republic or any other provider, if we were going to set up a system where you were only going to have to deal with toters provided by you guys and you were going to be paid by the village, I think you'd have a position from which you could negotiate to actually have lower rates. We haven't tried that, and I suspect people aren't going to want to try that because my colleagues, every time I touch on this, they shake their heads and think I'm nuts. But the fact is that we are doing those two things. We are leaving money on the table because it's not tax deductible, which most people are taking advantage of, and we are subsidizing those who choose to use it very little or generate little garbage by those who are using it. This is, to me, a little bit like water. You pay a base rate to have the service available to you, and then you pay for what you use. We don't do that with this when we allow people to use stickers and just put it out there. The other thing is the amnesty day. I know folks are a fan of that. I know a lot of my neighbors are a fan of that. I've just got a problem with it. We are paying money and charging our residents by building into the rate to pick up everybody's garbage, not sort it and throw it in a landfill. I think it's just horrible policy. I know it's convenient. I've used it. I mean, I've gone to my attic and found stuff that the previous owner 20 years ago left there, and I've thrown it on the curb. But, man, think that through. We got 18,000 households at least once a year throwing all their crap on the curb, so it ends up in a landfill, and we're paying for it. It just really bothers me. The garbage contract, the costs are certainly advantageous to Downers Grove residents, and Republic does a good job with the service they provide. I just think that we should be rethinking the way we do this. That's clearly not going to win the day up here. It didn't last time, it probably won't again. But when I have troubles with this, I want people to understand why. I think we've got a structural problem, and I think we're thinking about this all wrong. We're thinking about it in terms of how can we avoid, as Commissioner Waldeck says, having a big long, drawn-out process and just keep it moving. And there may be some organizational value to that in today's world where we've got a lot of work on our plate. But I think we're environmentally not doing the best we can, and I think we're cost-wise not doing the best we can. And so that bothers me. Speech over. Thanks for indulging me, Mayor.
Anytime, Commissioner, thank you. Other questions or comments, Commissioner White?
If 51% of the people in the town are choosing voluntarily to use stickers, I'm not particularly inclined to tell them they can't. I mean, I don't want to open up that can of worms. And and it's an intriguing idea that maybe we can save some money. I don't know if we'd save enough to make it worth the headache we'd have to go through to find out if we can save any. Just a quick comment about the Amnesty Day. That's something where people have strong opinions one way or the other. And I think there's only one over 5 years. I'm not sure. I may be wrong. I'm not sure that really affects how much stuff ends up in the landfills, because if it's not picked up on Amnesty Day, people will pay for their own private dumpsters, and it'll end up in the landfill that way. I mean, it's not going anywhere else other than the landfill, which is a larger problem that we as a society need to solve. I'm not going to hold up the contract over one Amnesty Day, 2 Amnesty Day, or 0 Amnesty Day. I don't really feel strongly about it any which way. I do like the idea of continuing what's been working without complaint. I'm getting this off our plate because we have plenty of other issues we need to deal with.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will just add that I remember, even farther back than Commissioner Waldeck, that the solid waste refuse conversations used to be weeks and weeks long, and we used to have a packed village hall, and it was a very contentious topic. It took up a lot of time and a lot of effort. It has been that was then, this is now. It has been a delight in recent years. And the reason being largely is that the service has been tremendous. How do I know that? I've been mayor for over 6 years. You know how many complaints I've gotten about garbage service since I've been mayor? I can't even think of one. This is something where the community is very happy with the service they've been receiving. And to quote Commissioner Earl, if it's not broke, I'm not going to try to fix it. When we have other things that clearly the community is more focused on in terms of addressing. And not only has the service been good by the lack of people complaining, which is, believe me, something that everyone has an opinion on, and they would know how to complain about it if they wanted to. We've been able to maintain that service, which comes with a familiarity between the service provider and the community. I don't mean a familiarity in the bad sense. I mean that the service provider knows the streets, knows their customers, and delivers what they're looking for, and those are the residents of Downers Grove. But they've been able to do that at either no increase in cost, and all the information we looked at earlier about the broader economy, that's remarkable in and of itself, or very minimal cost increases. So continued good service. This is the least of the things that we hear about from anybody, and at no or very little increased cost, it's really hard to argue for some kind of disruption. There are things that deserve a disruption every now and then. I'm not sure this is the one that goes to the top of the list. And in fact, we know from prior times when we had people come in and promise us they were going to take things over, there is a cost to disruption, not just internally here, but also in the community. And I tend to agree that the economic case has not been made to me that we need to engage in that disruption for any other reason than it might be nice to engage in some disruption. If there were a time when either service was falling off or clearly there were big economic gains to be made, then that's a completely different story. I just don't see that, haven't seen that, and certainly don't see that here today. The rest of it, to me, with respect to stickers versus carts, I think that it goes back as long as Cubs versus Sox in Downers Grove. People are very passionate about their preferences. The community is roughly split 50-50. I don't know that anybody up here, except maybe for Braveheart Commissioner Burnett, wants to get in the middle of that fight.
Coyote, maybe.
Maybe. But things like the stickers versus carts, Amnesty Day, recycling, now composting, these are things that the community has spoken about. And if we could deliver it to them at essentially nominal cost, then as far as I'm concerned, let the people have what they want. They've spoken, and this is something that just about everybody has an opinion on solid waste, one way or the other. Let them have what they want. Amnesty Day was gone for a while. I remember being here when it was gone, and we heard about it. And it came back because the community demanded it back, frankly. Not everybody. I'm not saying it's unanimous, but pretty loudly we heard from the community that they wanted it back, and I think that we've struck a good balance in how many we provide. I don't know if we need to have another one. I think one is probably fine, but again, if people want two, the reality is that things go out on Amnesty Day, and it's amazing how stuff just disappears before the trucks show up the next morning. So I'm not sure it's going into a landfill necessarily. And my goodness, now with next door, I don't know if we even need Amnesty Day. All you have to do is post that something's in the street and it's gone in 5 minutes. Once again, showing how the world changes. So my view is, I think that once again, staff has done a great job, and I do want to compliment our service provider, because part of the reason why this is an easy decision every year is because of the high quality of service and keeping the cost down. So you've helped us make it easy to continue the relationship. For that, we're appreciative. And I'm not just saying that from the government standpoint. I think literally the community, by their silence on this topic, has spoken volumes. So I'm pleased with the direction that we're heading. And I do agree. I think we have, at least right now, bigger fish to fry. Other questions or comments from the council? Questions or comments from members of the audience? All right, thank you. Next item, please.
Is an ordinance providing for the issuance of general obligation refunding bonds, which is a cost-saving effort. Here to provide more information on this item is our Finance Director, Judy Budney.
Good evening, Ms. Budney. We're getting the all-star team tonight. Miles Baker, Budney.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We have a parameters ordinance.
Popovich, I'm sorry. I left out the cleanup here.
Authorizing the refunding of bonds. A refunding is similar to a mortgage refinancing, where homeowners refinance their homes in order to save money on their monthly payments because interest rates have gone down. This is the same thing, only we will be saving money on our debt service payments because of the lower interest rates. And this refunding is on the 2008B TIF refunding bonds. These bonds are callable, and staff is proposing a refunding with a maximum issue size of $2.3 million, which is expected to save about $120,000 or 5.24% net present value savings. Staff is proposing to use a direct placement through a competitive process that will be done through the village's financial advisor. This will save us money compared to a public offering because we won't have to pay for rating agency fees or underwriters' fees. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Judy. Questions or comments from the council? I have a softball question. How important is our AAA bond rating and our ability to achieve these kinds of savings?
It is extremely important. Our AAA rating is going to be attached to the offering that's going to be proposed to all the banks. That will be the last write-up that we had will be attached to our offer.
Thank you. And I think it's important to emphasize that every time we have an opportunity is these bond refinancings, or this place, it's a private placement of a bond, allows us to save a substantial amount of money in debt costs. Here it's $120,000, but in the past it's been in excess of $1 million.
Correct.
And I've seen this multiple times since I've been the mayor, and really want to say two things. Number one, the terrific work that my colleagues and staff do to achieve and maintain that AAA bond rating. This is where the rubber really hits the road. It's not just a badge of honor. It's not just hey, gee, look at us, we have a AAA bond rating. It means real dollars to our community. And when we're talking about trying to save a nickel here and save a quarter there, this matters a lot. Here it's only $120,000, but as I said before, it's been in excess of $1 million, but it's over occasion, we keep doing this. And really appreciate that you're always on the lookout for these opportunities and jumping on them, knowing that we can take advantage of this whenever possible is terrific. And I know that while you're staying there, I have to compliment you and your staff for all the, I think you've probably forgotten how many financial budget awards that the village has won that helped make that AAA bond rating possible. And all of us thank you for the opportunities to save money like this, because we do need to be cognizant of it. It's the other reason why when I hear talk about a property tax freeze, and now I'm going to go on a soapbox for a minute, I get upset because it sounds good, but taking away, not that anybody wants to raise property taxes, you heard that conversation tonight, but taking away that ability to do it can detrimentally impact our bond rating. And a lower bond rating can degrade our ability to do things here tonight, like save $120,000. So while it sounds good in paper, for a municipality, and I'm not going to speak about the other 91% of the tax bill, that's out of my control, but for the 9% that we're responsible for, having that ability, not that we use it, but having that ability can help us achieve real savings like this, and that's where I think it's lost sometimes in the conversation. So end of my speech. Any other questions or comments, Commissioner Waldeck?
Yeah.
I got you all riled up now, didn't I?
Oh, yeah. You got me thinking. We're doing this again, and this isn't a question necessarily for tonight, but we have a policy, and in going through this, it's been a while since we've done this. If you please bring forth any recommended changes to our current policy, like for example, you say interest rates are going down. That's not exactly what we're hearing. We keep hearing about interest rate hikes. Maybe a change in the policy. Could we have pulled the trigger earlier? If you have any recommendations for changing or making the policy more efficient, please bring them forth. But this is something that we've done years ago, and we've done it multiple times, saved us a lot of money, and if there's a way we can tweak it and make it better, certainly. But it seems to be working well now. Could we have pulled the trigger earlier if because interest rates are actually going up now.
Well, these actually were refunding bonds from a previous series,
Right.
and the interest rate environment is better right now than it was at that point in time when we did it. So that was an advance refunding, which you can only do once, and now the bonds are callable. So now we couldn't do it before now. Now we had, since you can only have one advance refunding, these are callable bonds now.
Okay.
So
if you have any other tweaks, please bring them forth, but it seems to be working fine. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions, comments? Questions or comments on this item from members of the audience? Very good, thank you.
thank you.
And the last item on tonight's first reading agenda is an award of contract for our 2017 street resurfacing.
This really is the all-star lineup, isn't it?
And batting fifth in your all-star lineup tonight is our Public Works Director, Nan Newland.
All we need is Chief Jackson, Chief Bluter. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is one of the two large village contracts for street maintenance we present each year. We presented contract a couple months ago. This contract is primarily financed through motor fuel tax that we receive back from the state of Illinois. So in this contract, we focus on the simpler resurfacing and some minor patching on these streets. This is a request to award a contract to Geneva Construction Company of Aurora, Illinois, in the amount of $1,797,020.84. This contract represents one of 4 contracts for street maintenance. As I said, we had contract A previously. We'll also do some crack sealing, and we'll do some patching in the fall. So you'll see that contract come to you as well. We advertised for bids and received 3 bids. Geneva was the low bidder. They completed this same contract for the village in 2010 as well as 2016 and have done a good job for us, and we do recommend award of this contract to Geneva. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Nan. Questions or comments from the council?
Here's a list. There's about 20 streets that we'll be addressing with this contract.
Oh, we'll let that sit up there because everybody at home wants to look at the list and see if there's streets on there. Thank you. Questions or comments from the audience? Final questions or comments from members of the village council while I try to find a graph. Here it is. Thank you. I just wanted to mention, since we're talking about these revenue and expense items, that for the FY17 capital budget, just to give you an idea, streets, of which this is obviously a big one, about 37% of our annual capital budget. To give you an idea of some of the things that we deliver as a community. That's here's one big example here tonight. And with that, thank you very much.
That ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to item 9, the mayor's report. Just two quick things. Number one, I want to thank everybody who came out and enjoyed the bigger and better Independence Day parade. Somehow we picked the one day. Of course, we didn't pick the day. The day was picked for us back a long time ago. But we lucked out. The weather was fantastic. It was a not too hot day, no rain. It was a really terrific day for the parade. It was bigger and better. The bands were phenomenal. The reenactors were great. The cannon was a nice touch. So I think it was it really was better, and I heard lots of good things. The only complaint was that some guy running around with a mayor shirt on left too big of a gap between the village council and the District 99 band. Other than that, it was really well done. So I want to thank everybody who came out along the parade route. A lot of people came out. It was a good time, and thank you to staff for coordinating everything. I think it really went well. And the second thing I want to mention is this Saturday, July 15th, from 9 a.m. till 10 a.m., we will be hosting our monthly Coffee with the Council at the Downers Grove train station just outside of the Farmers Market. This is an opportunity for residents to come by and have sort of a informal questions or comments of a general nature with the village council. There will be various members of the council there outside of the Farmers Market this Saturday from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. So if anyone wants to come down and share a comment or ask a question, we would invite you to come down and do so. And while you're there, please make sure that you visit the downtown Farmers Market and maybe walk around downtown, buy a few things. We could use the sales tax. That ends my report. That brings us to item 10, the manager's report. Mr. Fieldman, back to you.
Just a quick summary, Mayor. You mentioned earlier that the state of Illinois did approve a budget. The impact on the village of Downers Grove and all municipalities in the state is minor. It's a lot better than it should have been for now, and that is that 2% holdback on home rule sales tax as a state processing fee. It does translate into 6 figures for the village of Downers Grove. It will reduce revenues by $40,000 in the general fund and $120,000 in the capital projects fund. As you noted, we will continue to monitor state actions and work to preserve municipal revenues because a lot of the solutions that they put in place right now are greatly appreciated. However, they don't appear to be sustainable in the long run, so I have a feeling we will be facing the same issues on an ongoing basis. We will continue to monitor. And that ends my report tonight.
Thank you. Appreciate that. That brings us to item 11, our village attorney's report. Good evening, Ms. Petrarca.
Good evening, Mayor. Only 3 items to present this evening. The first is an ordinance rezoning of property located at 4910 Cross Street, an ordinance establishing a food and beverage tax, and an ordinance providing for the issuance of general obligation refunding bonds in the village not to exceed $2.3 million. All 3 of these items will be on next week's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to item 12, which is reserved for village council member reports. This is an opportunity for members of the village council to either share with the public and audience items of interest or other goings on in the community, or to also report out on something related to their liaison roles to other entities. We'll start with Commissioner Jose. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. No report. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Waldeck.
No report.
Thank you. Commissioner Wallace.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Barnett.
No report, Mayor.
Commissioner Earl.
No report, Mayor.
And Commissioner White.
No report.
And I have no further report. So with that, I will move right to item 13 and ask for a motion to adjourn.
Originally, I move that this council adjourn.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. We are adjourned. Good night.